Before I ask a few questions and then open it up to you for some questions, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this piece and how it kind of came to be from a conversation with Sunita this summer over coffee. That sort of, even though not everything was kind of put to keep, like we knew exactly what the pieces were going to be, or Sunita knew exactly what the pieces would be. Right away the question of why worry about their futures was sort of prominent, and it always sort of came back to that. Pieces came, pieces left. A lot has changed in the show throughout it, which I'm sure we'll talk about this evening. But that it always kind of came with so much care for these stories and this idea of the title, "Why Worry About Their Futures," and that kind of really has stuck with me and has made it such an exciting process for us. Before I ask some questions, can you quickly introduce yourselves, tell us what you did in the show, and hopefully we will have sound from our guests that have joined on Zoom as well.
My name is Cara Tierney. I am a visual artist, moonlighting as an actor, I guess, for this. I play Titi as well as Parrot 1.
And my name is Sunita Fazic. I am the producer of the show, and I am the playwright of the last piece called Expecting.
My name is Lawrence Aronovich, and I am one of the writers. I wrote the middle piece, The Audit Test.
I'm David Robertson, and I did The Audit Test.
Joanne Meadows, director.
Danielle Savoie. I was CJ in the first play, which was The Sky It Falls, and Parent 2 in Expected.
Phil Trier with sound design and sound performer.
Get you to introduce yourself.
Did you hear
You can't hear over there very well.
Oh dear.
Belly.
The story of the last 3 years.
Okay. Maybe, and I don't know if he'll be able to stay on the call for much longer, but I don't know if you want to maybe introduce a little bit of how these sort of came into the project.
Yeah. This is Taiwo Afawi, and he is a theater maker as well as the Canadian Research Chair in Socially Engaged Theater from the University of Regina. And he was there with us as a consultant to try and kind of think through what these plays were about and how we could put them together. And in particular, during a phase when there was another little bit more controversial play in the lineup called Seven Jewish Children by Carol Churchill. And so he was trying to help us to think through that. And I'm not sure, can you hear me, Taiwo?
He can.
You can't, this is a metaphor.
I can hear you.
And that is, Keith, can you hear us?
I can.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Quickly, hello everyone. My name is Keith Barker. I'm one of the playwrights of the piece that you saw this evening. I'm a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario. My maternal grandfather from Mattawa. But I was raised in Treaty 3 territory, mostly. And I'm coming to you from Stratford, Ontario. I just finished a workshop this evening and then drove back, so I just arrived at my house. So I'm very happy to be here. I wish I had been there for opening night. So it's nice to see all of you.
And he wrote the first play, The Sky It Falls.
I'm gonna actually move on the other side so that you can maybe hear me better, both Keith and Cairo. But so I have a question to, without moving in front of the projector. I have a question to sort of start off the conversation for all of you. And it actually starts with a quote that I love that has been part of the show description. So you would have seen it in your program or the website. But it says a short play is like a first kiss or a sudden heartbreak. It has the potential to change us forever. And with that quote, and even in conversation that the team has all had together that I've had the privilege to sit in, these pieces ask very difficult questions, but they don't give they don't really give answers or resolutions, because in a way they're too short to do that, and that is the purpose of these short pieces. So in not giving any resolution to the audiences, I'm wondering what you want them to take away from something that is unresolved, and what it might incite them to do after the show. Anyone want to kick us off?
Okay, I wrote that sentence. So I hope you've been kissed and heartbroken tonight. I guess if I were to have a point of entry for an answer, I guess I would want to talk about a text exchange that I had with my brother, who's here somewhere in the room. Hello, Ismar. And I was telling him that in my play there was some things around EI and social injustice, and how the working class, on whose poverty we depend to continue to have the comforts we have, are often the least supported. And so he responded something that really struck me, and it was like, I can't imagine. And then I wrote back something really profound, but that I hadn't thought about, and it was, you don't have to. My play is going to do that imagining for you. And so that made me realize that in particular for the short play form, it really is really powerful images. They're moments. They're imaginaries that are meant to, hopefully if they're successful, kind of leave an imprint on you, whether that's a visceral imprint, an ethical imprint. And so you have these images that stay with you. And my hope, even though like maybe art does nothing, as your Auden was telling us, if anything, I hope that the short plays broaden people's image repertoires, so that the next time that a civil servant who works on the policy of EI, or a chef here maybe in the room who wants to buy industrialized chicken versus a local organic farming chicken, maybe they will pull from this image repertoire that plays have given them. And so that, I think, is what the short play can do, is leave us with these little images. Does anyone else who would like to?
I think Joelle has something to add in.
Well, I started reading Keith's play first, and I'm from Northern Ontario, so I thought I'd seen this conversation. It was very strange for me. It was like this immediate moment of identification. And as I worked through the other two pieces, it's committed and engaged theater, which begs a lot of questions. And I think the evening and all three plays in a way are about breaking down apathy or questioning ourselves about why we're apathetic about things. Like chicken tastes good, is that a reason to eat it? You know, we see the person begging in the street. Do we keep on walking by? You know, why do we still make babies when there's a climate crisis? You know, and in this case, I love it because it's so deliberate. It's definitely a choice by a loving couple. So it's when we beg questions, we're asking the audience to think through. And I think one of the great pleasures of theater is 2 weeks later. You're having your coffee in the morning and you're thinking about the show you saw, and suddenly the meaning starts to come back to you because it's lived with you a while. And so doing these kinds of pieces, that's what I felt what this was all about. And that makes me very happy because it's hopeful. And man, we need some of that.
I would just follow up on that by suggesting that the questions that Sanita composed that went into the program are a kind of restatement of the Auden text. Is anyone in this room human? Well, how did you respond to the images that were presented, the metaphors that were presented? How did they move you? Did they move you? There's no right or wrong answer to any of those questions, but that is what theater does. I don't know if poetry makes nothing happen or not, and I don't know whether theater does or not, but it's what we try to do as artists, and hope that you, the audience, are moved in some fashion, whether it be moved emotionally or moved to political action, I don't know. but that is what these glimpses, these moments that these short plays, we hope, can provide.
Anyone want to add anything, even Kyle or Keith, to that?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that if we want. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. I think for me, I just know I grew up like Joel, grew up in Northern Ontario. My uncles have some very deep-rooted opinions, and nothing I say will ever change them. They see me as a snowflake from Toronto, and tell me that, and that's where we come to pass. But I still love them dearly, and I have a great fondness of the conversations we have, because I understand that I actually can't change their minds, but maybe I can change perspectives. And I've always held that a belief that empathy is learned. And so if you learn about someone's story, like so many people, I was at the NAC when Corey Payette's piece, Children of God, was done. And there were so many people in the audience, like, I've never heard the story of residential schools before. People were really moved and crying and really kind of feeling it in their bodies, like emotional. So that I always loved that idea that you can take someone and actually like reach into their heart and give it a little squeeze and say, hey, this is the human condition, the human experience. That humanizing, I love humanizing the politics I don't agree with. Those men that drive chicken trucks on the highways, I question every time I drive by them. I can't even look at them. I find it really difficult to look and you see pigs or you see beef cattle or chickens. So the idea of like, who are these? They're just guys like you would see at a coffee shop, Most people say probably to Tim Hortons, but maybe at a Starbucks, maybe they like lattes, and they just happen to drive those trucks. So I'm always thinking about what are my perceived ideas of these people and what are the human reasons why they do the things they do. And so, yeah, I realize that I also understand the apathy, the idea that people are tired of certain narratives that are necessary at the times. Having been an artistic director of an Indigenous theater company, having to talk to people who are just tired or feeling like they've heard this too many times. And so I'm always trying to think, how do I reinvent stories I want to tell from a different perspective that is talking about the same thing and yet addressing and thinking about that you can then, because once you know, you can't unknow it. And then you actually have to make the choice of what that is. And so I like that. I like Joel, like 2 weeks later it hits you, or you're still talking about something. Right? Something niggles you. You're like, it just got me and I can't let it go. Like that's the hope of 10-minute play for me, is that it's a conversation starter, but also it's the drive home. It's the having coffee on a Sunday. It's 2 weeks later, you're watching a movie and go, see, this reminds me of that thing and I just haven't been able to shake it or whatever. And it's a conversation you want to have with your parents or your daughter or your best friend. So that's the kind of power of it that I love.
And if I may add, can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks, Anita, for the introduction. I couldn't hear anything at that time. I think I love the dramaturgy of questioning, particularly for me, where I see it both in theater and in the academia, and I work in community. The process of constantly asking questions, re-asking, we can never over-ask. And I think that's something that is really important for us, not necessarily to have answers to them, but for us to constantly check our humanity, our positionality, our assumptions, our biases, and all those things. Because I think that the more we ask those questions, it's like they face us, and there's some that we may never have answers to them. It's okay. But the fact that we're asking that and we're walking through that, regardless of how messy it may be, and I think that's something that these three pieces bring together in a very powerful way, where they're not necessarily offering any solution or anything, but they are bringing those key questions right in front of us, and that then bring out those kind of nuances that we struggle with, like Keith said, and which is really beautiful. I'll leave it at that, and happy to ask questions later on. Thank you so much.
I might move us on to another question that is kind of looking at the three pieces in a different way, and that's in although The Sky Falls was written specifically to be paired for this triptych at the festival, The Autumn Test and Expecting were written without that intention. So I'd be interested to see that in the rehearsal process, like how did these shows, two of which were not intended for here necessarily, speak to each other and bring something out, or in which ways did they butt heads?
It's a question for the actors.
I think that's a question for the director.
Nice try.
Nice try.
I mean, to say something very evident stylistically, they're radically different from each other. The through line is thematic. So, and also there was so many permutations of this project. I actually replaced Keith, who was supposed to be the director for this evening. And I came in with a team that was already, in place, and I absolutely embraced that because they're wonderful people. But it's also because I like that kind of urgency of doing theater now, because we have to do it and the show's going to go on, and Sunita has always had that energy and it permeated through the whole project. We're in sort of like a lab context. That's how I describe it. I mean, we're testing texts for the first time with actors with limited amounts of time. When you work mostly in French and you come to English, there's always this moment of, oh my God, there's so little time versus the French system. And so when you take these, I embrace it and I say to myself, well, let's put the urgency at the forefront. Let's try to help the audience see the through lines. This is politically committed theater. Let's embrace that as well. Let's leave as many questions hanging as possible, because that's what the plays are about. And I say all that because what is particular about this project for me is the degree of commitment from everybody. Like, once you got into this team, you just weren't leaving. You know what I mean? It was this sort of like, and again, this is Sunita, who is a great builder of teams. I never thought that this project would never happen. I always thought that this project was absolutely necessary. And if it was awkward at moments, that was amazing. Because we have too many veneers over the art around us right now that don't allow us to access meaning for us. And I just sort of felt there wouldn't be any of that in this project, regardless of the stylistic change, regardless of who came on at which point, regardless of degrees of writing and stylistic stuff. I kind of didn't care. I had fun. I think we all did.
How humble, because I love the stylistic choices you've made, if I can interject. And I feel like the greatest gift here has been to have a director who is able to take 3 different worlds and bridge them with so many interesting choices given very limited resources. And in particular, I love the balloons, because for me, they represented that difficult cross between something that is too big, too difficult, and then that like balloon of hope, that balloon that represents the future, the children of the future and what they'll inherit. So I just thought that in terms of that question of like bridging what are 3 distinct worlds, I think the director did an excellent job in doing that. But I mean, I'll leave it to the actors as well to see, especially you, Danielle, and Kara, because you played in the same clothes almost 2 distinct plays. I feel like there was so much resonance. I don't know what you think.
Just one thing before the answer. We flirted with the idea of saying they're the same characters like 5 years later, but it fell apart.
They got
It didn't work. We tried.
Well, I think we touched on this before, for the 2 pieces that we did. I mean, all theater is about humanity, but at the end of the day, the thing that links them is the humanity, and also the question of neither option, neither thing is wrong. In the first play, my character is traumatized by these chickens, and Tara's character has to feed a family and has no choice because they're in a position that they gotta work to put food on the table, or these are working class people. So I think, apathy, yes, all of that, but we have the humanity of a person who has no choice or thinks they have no choice. That's what's really at the forefront, and it's the same thing with the other one as well, where we're going through a climate crisis. The headline, possibility of human extinction, it's a real headline that we've had. But children are hope. There's the dissonance of how can we possibly bring a child into this world when the world is ending? But we can't fix that without the children. So I think it's important, yes, apathy, we need to contend with that, but I think it's important to not view it too much in one way. I'm not a writer.
They're not binaries. Like all the questions in the
Yes.
plays are not binaries. It's this big mess of gray. And that's the world we live in. So let's name it so we can, I hope, take position, knowing full well we're going to not please everybody around us. And I think that's one of the things that we have trouble dealing with, is we sort of want to bend to please. But sometimes we have to stand on the ground we live in to create hope. And I think these plays lead us there.
This might be a good time to open it up if there's any questions from the audience. I see a hand right in the plaid shirt.
In terms of like the through line of hope, there is a sense of sort of time, shifting in time. Like the middle play taking place in the 1950s, and this new sort of end plays being very, very modern, reflective of sort of today's world. And I was wondering if you can speak a little bit more about sort of the progress made as a society and how now we can speak about the things that the poet was too afraid to speak about in that middle play, versus now that sort of call for empathy and justice towards Alan Turing, and how that sort of shifts on the two end plays to what makes us human, and how do we actually show that love? How do we care for Icarus when the chickens are locked in the back of the dinosaur? And if we can speak to sort of the progress made as a society, and if there's anything we were actually trying to say with that film.
Speaking only for myself, what you just articulated is what went through my head. The first rehearsal, the first read-through, sitting all the actors and the director and the playwright sitting around the table. I had been very flattered and honored when Sunita invited me to join this project. But I did kind of scratch my head and say, well, you know, this is a play about this poet from like a half a century ago. How does it fit? And the light bulb went off in the way that you described as I listened to the three plays being read together for the first time. Because yes, on the one hand, the poet is saying about suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters, what a terrible world we live in, etc., etc. But dare I hope. And that is illustrated by the piece before and the piece after. And so that's the thematic through line that Joelle was talking about. And so I was suddenly feeling, oh, I fit in here. I'm at home with these people. How nice. And I hope the audience gets that too. And apparently they did.
Do we have any other questions out there? Oh, I saw one in the corner there, and then Mishesh in the back.
Hi, yeah. I was just wondering, artistically, why you chose yellow in the color of
It started with a chicken. Well, there are references to the sun. I had a great time with the balloons, just so you know. It was something that I could explore for years and years and years. But there was the idea of the sun, the idea of it being hope, the idea of it being the chickens. At one point during one of the meetings, we talked about whatever solutions we find for this planet, it has to be interspecies, so it's as much about the chickens as it is human beings, industrial farming versus husbandry, what's the difference, so it's, I see it as a hopeful color, and I don't see it as associated with ideology, although this is changing with the situation in Ukraine, but I don't see it as associated with ideology as much as red and blue. So I want to try and get us a little bit out of that. It's also Nipissing number 10 in North Bay. They have a flag and it's yellow. I mean, it's a little bit of autobiography, but that's the First Nations reserve right where I live or grew up. So there was a bit of that. There's always a bit of autobiography.
Thank you.
Vishesh.
Yeah, I guess this is another question for the director. One of the moments that really kind of pulled me forward, as I always look for those moments when I see these theater. One of the moments that really pulled me forward was towards the end of the autumn test when one of the parents from Expecting is just standing there, looking at their baby, and on this kind of directing his words to them, but also is still in his sort of is still locked in his sort of thought. It was a very compelling moment for me because I felt like it was literally the past speaking to the present, like the kind of wistfulness of the past speaking to the anxieties of the present. And I'm wondering how you arrived at that moment. Was it something that you had planned right from the start, or was it kind of like one of those like wonderful kind of spontaneous moments in the rehearsal and all like, oh, we should do this?
Well, I wanted to end with Sunita's play because the birth for me was possibilities, and it's an explosion of so many things. When you embrace and you're committed to social causes, whether they be ecological or identity-based, or you're going to fall back. There's going to be moments where the light's going to dim. And I can imagine being in the 1950s, McCarthyism is coming around, and I kind of fled England because I couldn't be gay. I abandoned somebody I loved, and now I realized that they were a superhero, and my work, I think at that moment, means nothing. So it's a step back. But there's always hope. There's always a bubble in the carpet. You step it down, it's going to pop up somewhere else. And for me, the idea was that Danielle was protecting that in a way. We have a child. Lawrence is my spouse, and we have a child together. And I have to say, it reminded me of how deliberate it is to make a baby when you're a queer couple. I mean, it's so a choice full of ethical consequences and full of ideological considerations, and at the end you see it kind of always come back to love. And that's so important to me. If we don't allow love to resonate here, we're not going to change the world.
Also, pragmatically, we had to keep one of the balloons for our
I think we'll leave it at that for tonight. Thanks for joining. If you were super interested in this show, which I'm guessing you are because you stuck around, one of the pieces that was cut early on from this project is actually being read at our new Play Tuesday, which is next Tuesday. And so, if you want to see read the lost piece from Why Worry About Their Futures, join us on Tuesday for that and a few more readings of new contemporary works. And you'll get to see kind of what would have been another angle to this project. Yes,
one last thing. The talkbacks are great, but I kind of think we're already a community in a way that I think that we're already all thinking about the ideas that were on stage. There was this idea in Quebec City about pre-pandemic, where they said, bring somebody with you who never goes to theater. It doesn't matter if they're lefty or righty or liberally or whatever, but the most important, if you want society to change and you believe in political theater and committed theater, Bring somebody who never comes. Make it a night. Go have a beer beforehand. Because that's how these ideas will resonate more than tonight. Tonight is wonderful, but I feel like we're sort of validating things in a way. We can make more change if we invite people who are fearful to come through that door. And if you guide them in, that'll bring real change. Anyway, a thought.
The bar is still open. We have lots of snacks, so please stick around and we can keep having this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone.